Welcome to the Stronger with Age podcast, because aging is just the beginning.
You got it. We spent a lot of time talking about, like, the good stuff about aging,
Yeah.
like getting wiser and stuff.
Right.
But we thought it was also really important to tackle some of the,
Tougher things.
some of the tougher transitions that happen, as we get older
Right.
later in life. So today we're going to do a deep dive into the signs and symptoms that you might see when someone is approaching the end of life.
Yeah, I think this is something that a lot of our listeners are either going through themselves or maybe helping someone else through.
Absolutely.
And it can be a little bit scary.
It is.
But, I think knowledge is power, right?
100%.
So if we can understand what to expect,
Yes.
then then it's not so scary, and it allows us to just be more present with our loved ones and make the most of that time.
Right. And really appreciate the journey, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I think we've got some really good information for you today.
Okay, so tell me, what did you look at for this deep dive? What kind of sources did you find?
Well, we've got a bunch of reputable sources.
Okay.
We've got Healthline,
Uh-huh.
Ohana Care, Crossroads Hospice, Vigus Healthcare, Life Choice,
Wow.
WebMD, Marie Curie, and the Hospice Foundation of America.
Okay.
Oh, and I also pulled some really good stuff from a YouTube transcript called Ageless and Thriving Elderly Wisdom.
Nice.
So it's a pretty wide range.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty good mix.
Yeah.
So basically, you've gone through all of these articles and transcripts and stuff, and you've pulled out, like, the key points, things we really need to know.
The takeaways, right.
Yeah, okay. So where do we start?
Well, let's start with the months leading up to the end of life, maybe like 1 to 6 months.
Okay, 1 to 6 months before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what kind of thing are we seeing then?
Well, one of the biggest things is increased fatigue.
Okay.
And this isn't just like, oh, I need a nap fatigue. It's like profound exhaustion.
Wow.
And they're needing a lot more sleep than usual.
Okay.
And it's, as we age, our bodies just naturally start to slow down a little bit. So that energy production, kind of winds down.
Yeah, okay.
And even just doing basic things can be really tiring.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Right. And along with that,
Okay.
you might notice a decrease in their appetite and thirst.
Okay.
And again, this makes sense, right?
Right.
Because if they're not as active,
Sure.
they don't need as much fuel.
Okay.
So you might see them eating less, drinking less, and this can also lead to some weight loss,
Okay.
which can be alarming for some people.
Sure.
But at this stage, it's pretty normal.
Okay, good to know.
Right. And then another thing you might notice is that they're kind of withdrawing from social activities.
Okay, like they don't want to go out with their friends as much.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
So they're not going to maybe their bridge club anymore, or they're not really interested in like family gatherings as much.
Right.
And it's not because they don't love those people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's just their energy levels.
Yeah.
And their priorities are changing.
Gotcha.
So they're kind of turning inward a little bit.
Okay.
And this is also a time when they might start reminiscing about the past a lot more.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they might talk about their childhood or like earlier experiences in their life.
Right.
And this can actually be a really nice time to just sit and listen to their stories.
Yeah.
And just let them, kind of go through that process of reflection and maybe even tying up some loose ends in their memories.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And then emotionally, it's a roller coaster.
Oh, I bet.
Right?
Yeah.
You might see them sad 1 minute
Mm-hmm.
and then, they might be scared about what's coming.
Sure.
But then you might also see moments of acceptance
Okay.
and even like this incredible peace.
Wow.
It's really a mixed bag. It's just
Yeah.
a natural part of processing that, life is coming to a close.
That makes sense.
And these emotions can change very quickly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. And it's important to remember that some people might experience more pain or nausea during these months.
Okay, so that's something to be aware of.
Yeah. And Vitas Healthcare, they mention that specifically.
Okay.
And our bodies are also more vulnerable to infections at this time.
Right.
So just something to keep an eye on.
Okay, good to know. So this is all 1 to 6 months before the end of life. Okay, so now let's say we're getting closer.
Okay.
We're in those last couple of weeks.
All right. So 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah, 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay.
What's going on now? What kind of things are we going to notice?
Well, a lot of those same signs that we just talked about, they're going to become more noticeable.
Okay.
Like the need for sleep.
Okay.
It might get to the point where they're sleeping almost all the time.
Wow.
And it's really hard to wake them up.
Okay.
And they might completely stop eating and drinking.
Wow. Okay, so they're not really taking anything in at this point.
Not much, no.
Okay.
And then you'll probably notice some, changes in their bodily functions.
Okay.
So their bowel movements might become less frequent and smaller,
Okay.
and they'll be urinating less.
Okay.
And Healthline actually mentioned that the urine might look darker
Oh, okay.
because their kidneys are processing less fluid.
Gotcha.
Makes sense, right?
It does, yeah.
And then remember that fatigue we talked about?
Yeah.
It's going to get even worse.
Okay.
And they might become quite weak.
Okay.
So even just moving around a little bit can be really difficult.
Gotcha.
But Ahana Care suggests that if it's safe and possible, doing some gentle exercises at home can help them stay a little bit stronger.
Okay, so as long as it's safe and they're able to...
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And then their vital signs might start to change.
Okay.
So their blood pressure, their heart rate, their body temperature, those might fluctuate.
Okay.
Or they might start to go down.
Gotcha.
And their skin might feel cool to the touch.
Okay.
And it might even look a little pale or bluish because the circulation is changing.
Okay, so those are things to look for.
Yeah, and you might also see some restlessness or agitation.
Okay.
Like they might fidget or, pick at their clothes or the sheets.
Okay.
Or just seem really uneasy.
Okay.
And you might hear some congestion in their breathing.
Oh.
Sometimes called the death rattle.
Oh, wow.
Which sounds really scary, but
I can imagine.
it's basically just fluids building up in their throat.
Okay.
Because they're too weak to cough them up.
So it sounds scary, but it's not necessarily painful.
Exactly.
Okay.
It could be distressing for the people around them.
Right.
But usually the person isn't in pain.
Gotcha.
And then their thinking might get a little fuzzy. They might get confused, disoriented.
Yeah.
They might not know what time it is or where they are. Or they might not recognize people they know.
Wow.
Yeah. And some people even start to see things that aren't really there.
Oh, like hallucinations.
Yeah, hallucinations or visions.
Wow.
And sometimes they'll talk about seeing loved ones who have already passed away.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
It is.
Yeah.
And their breathing might change too.
Okay.
It might become shallow, or they might take longer pauses between breaths, or they might even have periods of really rapid breathing.
Wow.
Yeah, it could be pretty varied.
Okay.
And Vitas Healthcare also mentioned that pain can still be a factor at this stage.
Okay, so we still need to be managing pain as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is all happening in the last 1 to 2 weeks.
Right.
Wow. Okay, so now let's say we're getting down to the last few days.
All right, so let's break it down even further.
Yeah.
So like 4 to 6 days before,
Okay.
and then 2 to 3 days before,
Okay.
things get even more intense.
Okay, so what are we looking at here?
Well, all those symptoms we talked about, they're really going to ramp up.
Okay.
Their vital signs might be all over the place.
Okay.
And they might be less and less aware of what's going on around them.
Okay.
Really drowsy, not responding as much.
Okay.
And they might have a lot of trouble swallowing.
Okay.
Even liquids.
Okay.
It's called dysphagia.
Dysphagia. Okay.
Yeah. And then you might notice their fingers and toes, maybe even their lips, turning a little blue.
Oh, wow.
It's called peripheral cyanosis.
Okay. What's causing that?
It's just because the oxygen isn't circulating as well.
Gotcha.
And VS Healthcare mentioned a couple other things to look for.
Okay.
Like the crease between their nose and the corner of their mouth. That might start to droop a little bit.
Okay.
And their neck might extend back a little bit.
Wow. Okay.
And their breathing might change even more.
Oh.
You might see something called Cheyne-Stokes breathing.
Okay. What's that?
It's where they breathe really fast and deep for a bit. And then they stop breathing altogether.
Wow. Okay.
And then they start breathing again.
Okay.
It's a cycle.
Gotcha. All right.
And their pupils might not react to light as much.
Okay.
That's another sign that things are progressing.
Gotcha.
And Vitas Healthcare also uses something called the Palliative Performance Scale.
Okay.
Or PPS.
PPS.
Yeah, it's basically a way to measure how well someone's functioning.
Okay.
At the end of life. And if their PPS drops to 20% or less,
okay,
that's a sign that they're really declining.
Okay, so all of this is happening in the last few days.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about those final hours.
Okay, so now let's talk about those final hours.
Okay, less than 24 hours.
Less than 24 hours before death. Okay, what's going on now?
Well, they probably won't want any food or drink at this point.
Okay. And they'll likely stop urinating and having bowel movements.
Okay.
And you might still see some signs of discomfort.
Okay.
Even if they're not as responsive.
Okay.
Like they might grimace or groan.
Okay.
Or scowl.
Okay.
And their eyes might tear up or look kind of glazed over.
Right.
And they might be partially open.
Okay.
And their pulse and heartbeat will probably be really irregular or really faint.
Okay.
And their body temperature will continue to drop.
Gotcha.
And the skin on their knees, feet, and hands might get even more mottled.
Okay.
like a grayish blue color.
Right.
And their breathing might become really irregular
Okay.
with gasps, and then eventually will slow down and stop.
Wow. So that's the actual moment of death?
Right.
Okay.
But it's interesting.
Yeah.
WebMD and Ohana Care, they both mentioned that sometimes people will have this sudden burst of energy
Oh, wow.
or a moment of like really clear thinking
Okay.
right before they die.
Mm.
They're called terminal lucidity.
Terminal lucidity. Okay.
Yeah, so even in those final hours, things aren't always predictable.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and then at the moment of death,
Yeah.
the breathing stops completely.
Okay.
There's no pulse,
Right.
no blood pressure.
Okay.
And if their eyes are open, their pupils might be dilated.
Okay.
And their muscles will completely relax, so their bowels and bladder might release.
Okay.
And their skin might look pale, it's kind of wakeful as the blood settles.
Okay.
And you might even see some tears falling.
Oh, wow.
Or some little twitches or movements
Right.
just from the muscles relaxing.
Okay, so those are the actual physical signs of death. But we also need to talk about the emotional and spiritual side of things.
Absolutely, because those are just as important.
Right.
And those changes can start happening months before.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what kind of things are we looking for there?
Well, Healthline mentioned a few things.
Okay.
Like, you might notice that the person seems kind of resigned.
Okay.
Like they've accepted things. They might be in a low mood.
Okay.
Lacking motivation.
Right. Yeah.
And just generally withdrawing from life.
So kind of like they're checking out a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
And it's normal to feel anxious or depressed when you're facing your own mortality.
Of course.
Or when you're worried about what will happen to your loved ones after you're gone.
Absolutely.
And the need to say goodbye becomes really important.
Okay, so how does that manifest? How do they say goodbye?
Well, they might want to be involved in planning their funeral.
Okay.
Or they might want to make sure their affairs are in order.
Right.
You know, like their will, their finances, stuff like that.
Yeah.
They might want to give away some of their possessions to people they love.
Sure.
They might want to express their feelings to people.
Right.
Or they might want to, seek forgiveness or offer forgiveness.
Wow. So it's really about tying up those loose ends.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's not uncommon for people to start talking about going home.
Oh, interesting.
Or seeing loved ones who have already passed away.
Wow. Okay.
And those experiences can be very comforting too.
Yeah, so we should just kind of go with it, let them talk about it.
Yeah, just listen and be present with them.
Okay.
Don't dismiss those experiences.
Right.
Because they're very real to them.
Gotcha.
And you might also notice that they're more focused on spirituality.
Okay.
Or they might be reflecting on their life, their faith.
Right.
And they might ask for reassurance.
Okay.
Or they might want to share memories or offer advice.
Okay.
Wisdom that they've gained over the years.
Wow. Yeah, these are all really important things to be aware of.
And Crossroads Hospice pointed out something really interesting.
Okay, what's that?
They said that sometimes people will kind of test their loved one's readiness to let go.
What do you mean to that?
Like they might say things indirectly.
Okay.
Or give subtle cues to see if their loved ones are okay with them dying.
Wow. That's pretty profound.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, so we really need to be paying attention to these emotional and spiritual needs just as much as to the physical needs.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about how we can actually provide comfort and support during this time.
Yeah, so for physical comfort,
Okay.
little things can make a big difference.
Like what?
Like using a humidifier to help them breathe easier,
Okay.
keeping their lips moist with lip balm,
Right.
putting lotion on their skin to keep it from getting too dry.
Mm-hmm.
If they can still take fluids, offering them ice chips or little sips of water.
Okay.
You can use a moist cloth to help them.
Okay.
And it's important to change their position in bed regularly.
Yeah. Right, so they don't get sore.
Exactly.
Okay.
And make sure their bedding is comfy
Sure.
and fresh.
Okay.
And if they're still able to eat, offer them soft foods
Okay.
that are easy to swallow,
Right.
but never force them to eat
Okay.
if they don't want to.
Gotcha.
And keep the environment calm.
Okay.
Dim the lights, keep things quiet,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure they're warm enough.
Right, with blankets and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's for physical comfort. What about emotional comfort?
Well, talk to them
Okay.
if they're up for it.
Yeah.
But just listen. Don't judge.
Okay.
And try not to bring up anything that might upset them.
Right.
And even if they seem unresponsive,
Okay.
keep talking to them.
Okay, why is that?
Well, you think that hearing is one of the last senses to go.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so they might still be able to hear you,
Okay.
even if they can't respond.
Wow, that's good to know.
Yeah, so just keep talking to them.
Okay.
Tell them you love them. Hold their hand.
Okay.
Play some of their favorite music.
Okay, good idea.
And if they start talking about things that don't seem real,
Right.
just stay calm
Okay.
Don't try to argue with them.
Right, just go with it.
Yeah, just go with it.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to acknowledge that they're dying.
Okay.
It's okay to talk about it.
Okay.
And let them say their goodbyes in their own way.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to reach out for help.
Okay.
If you need it.
Like who could we reach out to?
Well, there are spiritual advisors, social workers, end-of-life doers.
End-of-life doers. Wow, okay.
Yeah, there are people who specialize in this.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about physical comfort, emotional comfort. What about just like practical things we can do?
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of practical things, too.
Okay, like what?
Well, if they're having trouble with incontinence, you can use pads to keep them comfortable
Okay.
and make sure they're clean.
Right.
And if they can still move around, help them.
Okay.
But always be careful. Safety is the priority.
Okay.
And just be there for them. To listen,
Right.
to reassure them.
Okay.
And if they're restless,
Yeah.
don't try to hold them down.
Okay.
Just talk to them calmly.
Gotcha.
And if they're congested, you can gently turn their head to the side
Okay.
to help drain the fluids.
Okay.
And don't force them to eat or drink if they don't want to.
Gotcha.
And if they're having trouble breathing, you can prop them up a little bit with pillow.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And don't forget about the caregivers.
Oh, yeah, this is so important.
Right.
The caregivers need support, too.
Absolutely.
So don't be afraid to reach out to family and friends or to professionals
Okay.
like hospice or palliative care.
Right. There are resources out there.
Exactly.
Okay, so this has been a lot of information.
It has.
But I think it's really helpful to understand all these signs.
Absolutely.
Because it can help us take better care of our loved ones.
Exactly.
And also, prepare our health.
Yeah, and remember, everybody's experience is going to be different.
Right, so this is just a general guide.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor.
Right.
Or a healthcare professional to get personalized advice.
Okay, good point.
And like we said before, hospice and palliative care can be amazing resources for both the person who's dying and their caregivers.
Absolutely.
And just one final thought.
Okay.
No matter what stage of life you're in, think about what really matters in your relationships.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Cherish the time you have with the people you love.
Right.
And make those moments count.
Absolutely. Okay, great advice.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed this deep dive.
I hope so, too.
And be sure to tune in for our next deep dive.
We'll see you then.
Bye.